Forget everything you know about America's wealth. Its shocking foundation wasn't just built on slavery, it was built on horrifying baby factories hiding in plain sight. The antebellum period of American history is built on one horrifying secret. Its entire economic output depended on the disturbing practice of slavery and turning people into property. Yet, at the turn of the 19th century, the transatlantic slave trade faced huge opposition. Grabbing new slaves from Africa was no longer an option for colonial powers. So, evil found other ways. Today, we rip open the truly disturbing story of human breeding farms in antebellum America. Foreign laws and American acts passed across the 18th century steadily stripped away and destroyed any personhood an enslaved individual had. This cruel process most pointedly took the enslaved from being seen as people to being seen as things, leaving all rights with the owner, not the person trapped in slavery. As this poisonous ideology took hold, the sale and purchasing of slaves became completely accepted, with no real objection from American society or its people. Don't be fooled. There is little kindness to be found in the action of prohibiting slave importation to the United States. The powerful men running America show us this clearly. President Thomas Jefferson was a renowned slave owner, fathering 6 children with the woman he owned, Sally Hemings. This Virginia native knew exactly how crucial slavery was to the South's economy. Far from wanting to end slavery or start abolition, stopping slave imports meant the value of slaves already inside America would skyrocket. People had become products, and also the means of making more products. Virginia, Jefferson's state, became the leading state in the production of slaves over time. The sale of slaves became its leading export product, even above tobacco. At the turn of the 19th century, the transatlantic slave trade was ending in Britain. William Wilberforce led a movement made up of Quakers and evangelicals to set up the Committee for the Abolition of Slave Trade. By 1807, the Parliament of Britain passed the Slavery Trade Act. This turn of the tide in Britain increased calls for ending slavery in America too. But in America, the money made from slave labor and its products was exploding. The production of sugarcane, cotton and rice, especially in the Deep South and Western America, was so incredibly profitable it became powerful political capital. Before the American Civil War, King Cotton was a phrase used to brag about the slave states' total control over cotton production compared to the abolitionist North. This cotton money made Southern states so confident they thought the North wouldn't even dare fight a war. Yet, in the twisted history of the United States, just when slave labor was most profitable, Congress and President Thomas Jefferson supported calls to stop bringing in new slaves. From 1808, importing slaves to America was banned, just as the cotton gin was invented and the demand for cotton and labor exploded. The 1808 Prohibition Act served as a massive protection racket for the internal slave market. Slave owners doubled down, chillingly calling their forced breeding programs a natural increase, ignoring the brutal management and deliberate efforts behind it. In a sickening twist, black women enslaved in America became a rare group receiving free health care, maybe the very first, as authors Ned and Constance Sublette call it in their book, The American Slave Coast. Why? Because the enslaved woman's womb became a money machine. Her ability to have babies became the most important thing to slave traders. We know home medical journals started circulating to help slaves through difficult births, something previously ignored. Because each baby was valuable property, black female slaves were expected to produce 4 to 5 children. Make no mistake, the high death rate among slaves made this breeding even more critical. Good breeding stock was a common, horrific phrase used to advertise a female slave for sale. Many women faced being constantly traded and offered rewards. Some were promised freedom if they bore 15 children. The gut-wrenching reality: a child as young as 12 or 13 could be forced into pregnancy. Her baby would be ripped from her arms, forced into slavery. People had become products under this system. The methods were pure evil. Childbearing for enslaved women often started at just 13 years old. It's terrifyingly likely that 4 to 5 pregnancies were expected before she even turned 20. Enslaved women forced into breeding faced endless dangers. The slave market thought nothing of selling women while they were pregnant. Many believed the life of a female slave was a brutal cycle of rape, pregnancy, and giving birth with little recovery, maybe just weeks, before she was expected to be pregnant again. Masters and slave owners are detailed in countless accounts as fathering slaves themselves. With no rights and no way to fight back, this system forcing children from women can only be called rape. Breeding farms meant white owners had illegal protection. Their black victims had none. Sexual abuse only counted if a black man hurt a white woman. Slave accounts reveal it was common for owners to control their slaves' sex lives. Arranged marriages and forced mating were key parts of the breeding culture. Once people were seen as property, their breeding mirrored how farmers treated animals. Slave testimony includes references to stockmen. Stockmen were male slaves brought to farms solely to impregnate female slaves. This practice of importing bucks became widespread. Slave owners wanted to produce as many strong slaves as possible for backbreaking field work. A famous study by economist Richard Such looked at Virginia farms in 1860. The shocking finding? The ratio of female to male slaves was around 2-to-1. The study found women outnumbered men by a staggering 300,000. This was purely to feed the monstrous domestic breeding industry. The deep racist beliefs behind slavery meant many owners felt forcing themselves on slaves was somehow right. Along with ignoring the systematic rape on breeding farms, white owners believed their will was better than a black person's. House slaves faced the highest risk of rape by their masters. One terrible result? Many mothers hid their children from the master's wife, terrified she'd see the father in the child's face. Harriet Jacobs, a house slave in North Carolina, said her master fathered at least 11 slaves. None of this factory-like breeding and abuse was for anything except making more money. People in the slave trade openly bragged about profits. One Virginia slave trader declared his enforced breeding policies gave him 6,000 slave children to sell in a single year. Thomas Jefferson is alleged to have boasted that Virginia's wealth grew 4% every year just from the birth of black children. Once people were considered property, the industry exploded. By the mid-1800s, the South's slave trade was worth around $4 billion. This insane number dwarfs the national income in gold and silver, all other money, and even the value of southern farmland itself. Slave owners made slaves more valuable than they ever imagined. Most shockingly, the slave trade in the early 1800s turned slaves from simple property into financial securities. The horror of taking personhood and making people property is known. The legal tricks used to turn people into cash machines are less discussed, probably because it's so stomach-turning. Slave owners in the 1830s wanted more money in their states. They found a way using the slaves' lack of legal rights, by mortgaging them. Banks sprang up in southern states like Louisiana and Mississippi. Slaves were mortgaged like houses or land to these banks. These mortgages were then bundled into bonds sold worldwide. This meant people in countries where slavery was illegal were still making money from bonds backed by human lives. In a sickening twist, ending the import of slaves helped create these global financial schemes in an enlightened world. The story of America's wealth is not one of freedom and innovation. It's one of terror, control, and unthinkable cruelty. When importing enslaved people became illegal, the system didn't stop, it mutated. Breeding farms rose from the ashes of the transatlantic slave trade, turning black women's bodies into tools of profit and children into currency. These horrors weren't hidden, they were accepted, normalized, even celebrated by some of the nation's most powerful men. We must not look away from this truth. We must name it, learn from it, and never let it happen again. Thanks for watching.